Creating an inclusive classroom. How universal design for learning and differentiated instruction can foster student success. This presentation synthesizes the information we have learned about universal design and differentiated instruction. My goal was to demonstrate how these principles can be applied in the classroom to support student learning for all. This will be a useful tool for any speech-language pathologist, especially those working as a school SLP. I look forward to referencing this resource in my next clinical placement in the school board. Let's get started. Here's a quick summary of what this presentation will cover. First, we will overview what universal design for learning and differentiated instruction are. We will discuss how these concepts overlap with and build off of one another. Next, we'll see how these concepts fit within a classroom context. We will discuss some practical tips for implementing both into the classroom environment and teaching philosophy. Lastly, we will apply what we have learned by going over several case studies of students in a classroom. This will help to solidify how we can use universal design for learning and differentiated instruction to support individual students with diverse needs. So what is universal design for learning? Universal design for learning is a framework for providing fair and equitable access to the curriculum for all students. It seeks to move away from a one-size-fits-all approach to education by recognizing how the interests, strengths, and needs of each student differ. Universal design for learning uses 3 guiding principles to minimize barriers to learning. The first principle is multiple means of representation. This means that we provide students with different supports and methods to engage in their learning, like offering visual aids as well as written text. The second principle is multiple means of expression. This gives students choice in how they demonstrate their learning. For example, allowing students to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways, like oral presentations, written assignments, or drawings. The third principle of universal design for learning is multiple means of engagement. This emphasizes that students have differing motivations and may not engage with the learning material in the same way. Accounting for differences in learning motivation helps to facilitate persistence and interest in learning. What is differentiated instruction? Differentiated instruction occurs when educators adapt their teaching methods to accommodate the specific strengths and areas for growth of their students. This approach values the unique differences between students and is based off of the idea that learning is most effective when it occurs within a child's zone of proximal development. According to the Ministry of Education, there are 4 main ways for educators to implement differentiated instruction. Educators can differentiate the learning content by varying the lessons and learning materials to meet student needs and preferences. The process of learning can be differentiated by offering different activities and tasks to students. Learning products, or the ways in which student learning is demonstrated, can be differentiated by offering choices for how students present what they have learned with flexible assessment tools. Lastly, the learning environment itself can be differentiated to increase support with small alterations to the physical space, like offering flexible seating arrangements and different work areas. So how do universal design for learning and differentiated instruction fit together? Universal design for learning is a broad and proactive approach that seeks to minimize barriers to learning, whereas differentiated instruction is a response to a learner's specific needs. Although these 2 concepts are different, there are many similarities between the 2. Both universal design for learning and differentiated instruction take into account that students have different learning styles and preferences. Both emphasize that there should be a variety in assessment and teaching style to accommodate these preferences. Universal design for learning and differentiated instruction each emphasize the importance of supporting others in the classroom. When used together, universal design for learning and differentiated instruction can create an inclusive learning environment that better supports all students in the classroom. So now that we have a better understanding of what universal design for learning and differentiated instruction are, let's discuss how we can incorporate these concepts into the classroom. One of the best ways to implement universal design for learning and differentiated instruction into the classroom is by ensuring that the physical space is set up in a way that allows for student success. The following are some helpful tips to make your classroom environment more inclusive and conducive to learning. One useful strategy is labeling different areas and resources in your classroom with words and pictures. For example, you can label your reading nook and the computer area in your classroom. It is also important to monitor the level of background noise in the classroom and intervene when it becomes too loud. Creating a safe space in the classroom, like a small tent or secluded corner, is also a great way to incorporate universal design and differentiated instruction. This safe space should be a common, quiet area that students can access as needed. Ensure that there's appropriate lighting in the classroom is also an important tip. Some students may find fluorescent lights too harsh, but others may need bright light to see. Get to know your students and their environmental needs. Lastly, work to minimize distractions in the classroom. This includes visual distractions, like an overly cluttered classroom, as well as distractions for our other senses. In terms of teaching style, there are many things that educators can do to create a more inclusive learning space. As mentioned earlier, scaffolding student learning by working within a child's zone of proximal development is essential to maximize their learning. It's important to consider different learning preferences by incorporating a variety of individual, small group, and whole class activities. Don't assume that every child learns the same way or enjoys the same level of social demand. Find ways to engage your students without putting them on the spot. Try commenting and extending their message rather than always asking questions. Encourage a supportive environment full of listening and turn-taking, and create a predictable routine by following a known schedule. These teaching tips can truly support students in the classroom to make the learning experience smoother. Now, let's apply what we've learned to some realistic case study scenarios. The following examples highlight how, when utilized effectively, universal design for learning and differentiated instruction can support an inclusive learning environment for students with different strengths, needs, and interests. Read each case study, then pause the video and think about how you would modify the classroom environment and/or the teaching style to better reflect the principles of universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. Once you finish brainstorming, check out the next slide to see some possible answers. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. There are many different ways to incorporate principles of universal design and differentiated instruction into the classroom. Compare your answers with colleagues and see if you thought of anything different. So case study 1, Malika. Malika is a grade 6 student who loves music, drawing, and learning about animals. She has a developmental language disorder, so she experiences difficulties speaking and understanding written and spoken language. Her teacher, Mrs. G, knows that Malika sometimes has trouble following spoken directions in the classroom, so Mrs. G always provides Malika with written directions to refer back to during independent work. Mrs. G has noticed that despite these instructions, Malika often misses key steps, resulting in incomplete or incorrect work. Mrs. G asks you how she can better support Malika's learning. It's great that Mrs. G recognizes that Malika struggles to follow spoken directions and is working to accommodate these needs. However, Malika also struggles with understanding written language, so these written directions are likely not adequately supporting Malika's learning. You can help Mrs. G consider how she can provide multiple means of representation for task instructions. For example, she could incorporate visual elements into the instructions to support and reinforce the message. She can bold keywords and keep her instructions brief. Instead of presenting the instructions all at once, she can scaffold Malika's learning by providing the instructions in smaller steps to help her stay on track. Mrs. G can consider how the classroom is arranged to support Malika's learning as well. It may be helpful to arrange Malika's desk so she has a classmate nearby that she can ask questions to when Mrs. G isn't available. Remember, written language tends to be more complex than spoken language, so it can be more challenging for a child with a developmental language disorder. Case study 2, Ben. Ben is a grade 2 student with autism who loves learning about animals and playing with his toy lion. His teacher, Miss T, has called you in because she is having trouble engaging Ben in math class. She reports that Ben hates sitting at his desk during lessons and becomes very overwhelmed when doing daily math activities in small groups. She reports that Ben often looks distressed and puts his hand over his ears instead of participating. Miss T asks you what she can do to help Ben feel safe and engaged in learning. There are many things that Miss T can do to incorporate principles of universal design for learning and differentiated instruction into the classroom to support Ben. Miss T can be flexible in allowing students to choose where they learn best. If sitting at a desk is a barrier to Ben's learning that serves as a distraction, There's no reason why he can't sit somewhere else during math. Miss T can try changing it up and allowing those who need it to sit on the carpet, try a standing desk, or replace their desk chair with an exercise ball. Miss T can differentiate the learning process to ensure that the class is not always working in small groups, but when small groups are used, she can make sure to keep the noise level reasonable and create a safe space in the classroom for Ben to access when he feels overwhelmed or needs a break from the busy classroom environment. She can recognize the different motivations for learning that Ben has and try to incorporate his interests into the math activities, allowing for multiple means of engagement. A key reminder is that children with autism have different sensory needs. Appropriate lighting and noise levels can make a huge difference in these children's ability to learn and participate. Case Study 3, Sophia. Sophia is a grade 1 student who enjoys reading, gym class, and playing on the computer. She recently moved to Canada from Serbia, and her family speaks Serbian at home. Sophia's teacher, Mr. J, reports that Sophia is shy and doesn't participate in circle time with the whole class. He spoke with Sophia's parents, who said that she is still gaining confidence in her ability to speak English at school. Mr. J says that although other students are friendly, they sometimes talk over her and don't give her the time to respond. Mr. J has asked you to visit the classroom and offer some suggestions about how he can facilitate her language use and social inclusion in the classroom. It's great that Mr. J is thinking about ways to support language use and social inclusion. There are many ways he can modify his environment and teaching style to meet Sophia's learning needs. Firstly, Mr. J can label items in the classroom to help reinforce common vocabulary that Sophia will need. He can also differentiate the learning content and process to support her English vocabulary by pre-teaching her vocabulary and using visual supports to help her grasp the lessons. Mr. J can work with his other students to encourage listening and turn-taking so that Sophia has more opportunities to participate. Remember, be patient as it takes time to acquire a second language. Many bilingual language learners go through a silent period when first learning a new language. This is normal and will resolve as the child gains confidence in their new language. Educators play such an influential role in shaping the learning of their students. By incorporating principles of universal design for learning and differentiated instruction into their routine, educators can create a learning environment that supports the diverse learning needs of their students. As speech-language pathologists, we play an important role in helping teachers to achieve this. By working together, we can create an inclusive classroom that fosters student success for all.